Hey everyone, my name is Mark Taylor, and the last video I did talked about how difficult it is to write a book. It's even difficult to write a bad book. So this time I thought I would talk about the top 5 things I find difficult in writing a novel-length book, and they might not be exactly what you think. So when I started out to write my first book, now I have written one book, I am finishing up the first draft of my second book. So not that far into my writing and publishing career, but when I set out to write my first novel length book, or a fictitious novel, I was absolutely nervous and I had no idea what I was doing or what to expect. And so now that I have written and I am writing, these are 5 things that I find difficult in writing a novel. Let's get started. Number 1 is the timeline. Now, I told you these things aren't going to make a lot of sense, but the timeline, the length of time that is covered in the book, and also just the sequence of days or months or years that take place in the book. And so this idea of how long should my story last in time? Should it take place over a couple days? Should it take place over weeks? Should it take place over months? And then if it does, how do I cover the passage of time? Do I simply write a line that says 2 weeks later? Do I show what each day looks like for the protagonist and for the characters? Do I cover lunch? Do I cover dinner? How much of the days, how much of the weeks do I cover? I got to the very end of my first book and I had this sequence of time where it was supposed to be about a week from the time they found out the identity of someone to when the main showdown took place. And as I wrote it, as they found out, I realized there's no way that they're waiting a week for this, or they're waiting 2 days. That now they've got this information, they're going to act now. This would be stupid. It would make no sense if they didn't act right now. And so I had to change the timeline and the sequence of events because that's just what would actually take place. And so I find that difficult. I'm still trying to figure that out. Number 2, transitions between scenes and chapters. How do you end a scene? How do you end a chapter? What's the transition? I found out when I was going back and reading through my first draft of my first book, realized that just the way that it read was very jarring. How do you bring someone from one scene to the next scene without just making it seem so abrupt? And actually there are times when it probably works that it's abrupt, and very good authors do this in a way that you don't realize that they're doing it. A very good author, you should not recognize that an author is doing something very well in a book if they're doing it very well. It should just read seamlessly. You should be so engrossed in the story you're not even recognizing that there are these components of a story taking place, or this style of writing is taking place, because the author's so good at it. I am still learning just the tricks of the trade as far as transitions between chapters and scenes, and how to bring the reader along. Number 3, describing people and faces. I am not a big description guy. I don't really like description, and probably one of the reasons I don't really like it is because I'm not that good at it. It's not a strong point. It's definitely a weak point. And I also tend to skim lots of description in books. Unless it's actually furthering the story, I don't like description. So there are simple things that I kind of have to make myself do describing someone. I don't need to describe, an aquiline nose and high. I'm not good at it, but I also don't really care about it. But I also know that I need to give you somewhat of a picture of who this person is and what it looks like. I also found this that happened. In the first book, my main character is big. He is 6'5", like 250, and I didn't stop talking about how big he was. In every single scene I talked about this, almost. It was like I thought the reader might forget that he's a massive dude. And so I think I probably brought this to the reader's attention every single time he was around, and just way too much. So just trying to find the descriptions. Also, when people are talking, do I describe their eyebrows? I think rolling eyes is something that I go to, but trying to find different ways to express someone's emotions without just saying this person felt happy or this person was sad or confused, but actually trying to describe it, but then also struggling with not being that great at describing the features of the face. Number 4 is kind of like number 3, and this is repeating actions. If you are writing a novel length size, now they say 60,000 words is about 200 pages, which is a pretty short novel actually. My first book was 95,000 words, which put it at about 365 pages. Right now I'm at about 131,000 words, so I'm around 500 pages. How do you describe someone walking? How do you describe someone taking a drink? How do you describe someone entering a door? Do you even describe those things? I struggle with figuring out what to describe, what not to describe, and then how do I describe it in a way that's not stupid, where I'm thumbing through a thesaurus for another word for walk or said, right? Because that's one of the key things, is you don't want to be saying that person queried or that person observed or remarked, which I'm sure I've done, but how do I say something so it's not stale when I'm repeating something, but also not so that it just feels like it's a complete gimmick or I'm just making stuff up just to be different? And finally, number 5, what is the sequence of events? I do this in movies all the time, and like I said, I love story, and so if I'm watching a movie or I'm reading a book, I love to see how they tell the story. How do they piece out the bits of information that you need? When do they give you those bits of information? If you're trying to find out a secret about someone, if there is a character trait that changes the story, how does that come out and when? And so this is something, think for yourself. If you've never written a book, or if you are writing a book, it doesn't matter. If you were going to tell your story, where would you start? What details would you include? What makes you who you are, and what things led to that? And when would you tell someone about what makes you who you are right now? Would you start now with who you are, give something about you now? Would you start at the very beginning when you were born? Would you start somewhere in the middle? So the sequence of events is something that I love to look at in stories, as far as movies, television shows, books, and I love to see how the story is told, and where it's told, and why it's told, but it's something that I find difficult. So these are my top 5 things that I find difficult in writing a book of novel length. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like these videos, go ahead and subscribe, check out my other videos. Until next time, my name is Mark Taylor, and as always, keep reading, and you're more valuable than you could ever know.